session. The Honorable Michael Bailson presiding.
Good afternoon.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, be seated, everyone. Okay, we're here for a hearing in United States versus Howard J. Kane, criminal number 08324. Mr. Pease is here for the United States. Good afternoon. Mr. Scuderi for the defendant.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Kane, I'm told that you intend to plead guilty. Is that correct?
That is correct, Your Honor.
Okay, swear Mr. Kane in, please.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please state your name for the record.
Howard J. Kane, C-A-I-N.
Okay, Mr. Kane, you understand you're now under oath?
Yes, Your Honor.
And do you understand that I'm going to ask you a number of questions about your intention to plead guilty?
Yes, Your Honor.
And do you understand that you have to answer my questions truthfully?
Yes, Your Honor.
And do you understand that if you don't answer them truthfully, you can be prosecuted for perjury for making false statements?
Yes, Your Honor.
You're represented here by Mr. Scuderi, is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Has he been retained by you, or is he court appointed?
Yes, Your Honor. He's been retained by me.
He's been retained by you. All right. And do you understand that anytime you want to talk to him during this hearing, all you have to do is tell me that, and I'll stop asking you questions, and you may talk to him in private?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. And if you don't understand any of my questions, will you tell me you don't understand it before you answer?
Yes, Your Honor.
And if you go ahead and answer the question, can I assume that you've understood the question?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. And from pretrial services, we have? Good morning. Okay. Now, Mr. Kane, how old are you?
59 years old, sir.
Okay. And how far did you go in school?
I graduated from LaSalle College, and I did some graduate work at Temple.
LaSalle College?
Yes.
Okay. And you did graduate work in what?
Temple University.
Okay. Where were you born?
Philadelphia, PA.
Right. Have you ever been treated for drug or alcohol addiction or for mental illness?
No, Your Honor.
Have you had any drugs or alcohol yet today or yesterday?
No, Your Honor.
Are you under any kind of doctor's care?
I take a anti-cholesterol medicine, Your Honor.
All right. That's it?
That's it, Your Honor.
Okay. And how do you feel today?
Fine, Your Honor.
All right. Now, have you had enough time to go over the charges against you with your attorney, Mr. Scuderi?
Yes, Your Honor.
And have you, and are you satisfied with Mr. Scuderi's services?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Now, a plea agreement has been filed in this case. Who has the original? All right. Show it to the defendant, Mr. Pease. Is that the plea agreement?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Now, would you look at page 13?
Yes, Your Honor.
Is that your signature?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. And did you read it before you signed it?
Yes, Your Honor.
And did you understand it?
Yes, Your Honor.
Then there's a 2-page acknowledgement of rights. Do you see that?
Yes, Your Honor.
Did you re-sign that at the end?
Yes.
Did you read it before you signed it?
Yes, Your Honor.
Did you understand it?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. And have you and you've had enough time to talk about this case with Mr. Scuderi?
Yes, Your Honor.
And has he explained the charges with you and any defenses you might have?
Yes, he has, Your Honor.
Okay, Mr. Pease, would you briefly summarize the terms of the plea agreement, please?
Yes, I will, Your Honor. Your Honor, the plea agreement requires Mr. Kane to enter a plea of guilty to one count of an information charging him with tax evasion. He agrees to pay a fine and make restitution in amounts ordered by the court. This is a cooperation plea agreement, Your Honor, and our standard conditions of cooperation appear at pages 2 through 5 of the agreement. Essentially, Mr. Kane is required to cooperate fully and truthfully with the government and testify in any proceedings in which he's called as a witness. It's a condition of this plea agreement that he truthfully and honestly provide information to the government at all times, and if for any reason he were to fail in that regard, this plea agreement would not provide him with the opportunity to receive the benefit of a downward departure. Your Honor, if I may, I'd like to go over verbatim the government's requirements under this plea agreement with respect to cooperation.
Okay.
That is, paragraph 6 on page 5 sets forth that if the government in its sole discretion determines that the defendant has fulfilled all of his obligations of cooperation as set forth above, at the time of sentence, the government will do the following things. A, make the nature and extent of his cooperation known to this court. B, move for departure from the sentencing guidelines under Section 5K 1.1 if the government in its sole discretion determines that the defendant has provided complete and substantial assistance in the investigation or prosecution of another person who has committed an offense, including testifying in any trial or proceeding as required. The defendant understands and agrees the government will exercise its sole discretion regarding whether and how to investigate any information he provides, and that as of the date of this agreement, no determination has been made as to his eligibility for a 5K 1.1 motion, and we may refuse to file a motion if this agreement is breached in any way, including commission of an offense after the date of the agreement. The government is still free to make whatever sentencing recommendation as to imprisonment, fines, forfeiture, restitution, and other matters the government deems appropriate, and we're permitted to comment on all the evidence and the circumstances of the case and bring to the court's attention any and all facts that are relevant to sentencing. Your Honor, the defendant cannot withdraw this plea if this court declines to follow any of the government's recommendations, motions, or stipulations by the parties. We've reached a number of sentencing guideline stipulations under this plea agreement, Your Honor. First, the parties agree the base offense level in the case is 20 because the tax loss amount is greater than $400,000 but less than $1 million. Secondly, the parties agree the offense level should be increased by 2 levels because Mr. Cain failed to report or correctly identify the source of income exceeding $10,000 in any year from criminal activity. And the criminal activity that's referred to there is addressed in our next stipulation, Your Honor, and that relates to Mr. Cain's work under contracts with the Pennsylvania Senate Democratic Appropriations Committee. Specifically, we have another crime stipulation in which Mr. Cain agrees that in addition to what he's pleading to today, he agrees that he, along with Pennsylvania Senator Vincent Fumo, conspired to defraud the Senate of Pennsylvania by submitting false invoices under a contract with the Senate Democratic Appropriations Committee that resulted in payments to Mr. Cain for engaging in political campaign work in violation of state law, resulting in fraud losses to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania of more than $200,000. And as a result of this stipulation, Mr. Cain and the government agree the court should take it into account in deciding the sentencing guidelines range in this case. By his plea of guilty, the parties agree that he's entitled to a 3-level reduction for acceptance of responsibility. There's an appellate waiver provision in this plea agreement, Your Honor, which is paragraph 10, which provides that...
I'll ask him about that.
Okay. And then lastly, Your Honor, there are provisions in this agreement that require Mr. Cain to fully cooperate with the IRS, including making a $25,000 payment before sentencing, filling out the forms that he's required to, and fully cooperating with the ability and the assessment and the payment of his taxes.
Is he? Does the charge includes failure to file income tax returns as well as failure to pay?
No, Your Honor. There's one count of violation of Title 26 U.S. Code Section 7201, which is tax evasion for the period 1991 through 2006.
So he filed returns, but the indictment, the information charges that he didn't report all the income.
What we have done, Your Honor, is we've prepared with the assistance of a revenue agent who's in the courtroom what's called a revenue agent report. And Mr. Cain has already signed it and agreed to the assessment of his taxes. So that in lieu of filing returns, that will become the IRS's record of his unreported income.
But in the years in question, he did file income tax forms, but he failed to report.
No, Your Honor. No? He did not file any tax returns.
He did not file any returns.
Correct.
Okay.
No tax returns at all.
So he not only failed to pay, he also failed to file.
Yes.
Okay.
That's correct.
All right.
Lastly, Your Honor, the parties agree that no other promises or assurances have been made to Mr. Cain other than what's in the plea agreement.
Okay. All right. And Mr. Scuderi, do you agree that's a fair summary of the plea agreement?
Yes, Your Honor.
Do you agree with that, Mr. Cain?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Now, Mr. Cain, other than what is in the plea agreement, do you have any other agreements relating to your pleading guilty today?
No, Your Honor.
Other than what is in the plea agreement, has anybody made any promises to you with regard to anything about this case?
No, Your Honor.
Has anybody given you any promises or agreements as to what sentence you will get from me?
No, Your Honor.
Do you understand that nobody can give you any promises or commitments as to what sentence you will get?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Has anybody used any force, violence, or threats to get you to plead guilty?
No, Your Honor.
Are you doing this of your own free will?
Yes, Your Honor.
Why do you want to plead guilty?
Because I'm guilty, Your Honor. I didn't do what they...
Sorry?
I did not file my income tax.
Okay. Now, do you understand that by entering this plea, this may deprive you of valuable civil rights, such as the right to vote, hold public office, serve on a jury, possess a firearm, or hold a professional license?
Yes, Your Honor.
Have you ever been on supervision of crime before, such as probation, parole, or supervised release?
No, Your
All right. Mr. Pease, what's the maximum sentence and any mandatory minimum?
Maximum sentence, Your Honor, is 5 years in prison and a fine of $250,000, 3 years supervised release and restitution.
Okay. All right. Do you understand that's the maximum sentence that can be imposed under the law?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Now, in this agreement, you understand that you have agreed to cooperate with the government in terms of providing information and testifying when called to.
Yes, Your Honor.
And do you understand that if the government is satisfied that you have cooperated in compliance with this agreement, then the government may file a motion for a downward departure from the applicable sentencing guidelines.
Yes, Your Honor.
Have you gone over the concept of the sentencing guidelines with Mr. Scuderi?
Yes, Your Honor.
You understand that a pre-sentence report will be prepared by the probation department, which will review this offense and your background.
Yes, Your Honor.
And you understand that that report will show a sentencing guideline computation.
Yes, Your Honor.
And that will be expressed in terms of a level. If you don't have a criminal record, then you'll be in criminal record category number 1, criminal history category number 1, but the offense level, as I understand it, has been agreed to as level 20.
I think it's 21, Your Honor.
21, excuse me. And the government, if they're satisfied that you have cooperated as you've agreed to do here, then they'll file a motion for a downward departure from that sentencing guideline level. Do you understand that?
Yes, Your Honor.
Do you understand that if the government does not file such a motion, then I have no authority myself to depart downward from that guideline level?
Yes, Your Honor.
But do you understand that the sentencing guidelines now are advisory and that I also can take into account in imposing sentence other factors under Section 3553 of the Criminal Code relating to sentencing factors and can take those into account when imposing sentence?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Now, do you understand that even if the government does file that motion for a downward departure, that I do not have to grant it?
Yes, Your Honor.
And has anybody given you any promises or commitments that I would grant the motion?
No, Your Honor.
Do you also understand that normally when people are sentenced in criminal cases, they have a right to an appeal?
Yes, Your Honor.
And do you understand in this plea agreement you're giving up the right to appeal?
Yes, Your Honor.
And you also understand you're giving up the right to file any post-conviction petition, sometimes called writ of habeas corpus or a 2255.
Yes, Your Honor.
So that whatever sentence I give you, you understand you'll be stuck with that. There's no recourse.
Yes, Your Honor, I understand.
All right. And do you also understand that your attorney and the government attorney can agree on facts and make recommendations or motions and request at sentencing, but I don't have to do what they ask me to do?
Yes, Your Honor.
Do you understand the guilty plea is binding on you whether or not I agree with their facts and recommendations?
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, do you also understand that after the pre-sentence report is prepared, you'll get a chance to read it with your lawyer and file objections, and the government has the same opportunity?
Yes, Your Honor.
And do you understand I'll then have a hearing in which I will decide any objections and also hear any evidence and argument about sentencing and impose sentence?
Yes, Your Honor.
And do you understand that if you disagree with my ruling on objections or you disagree with my sentence, that that's not grounds to withdraw your guilty plea?
I understand, Your Honor.
So do you understand that by pleading guilty today, you're pleading guilty for all time?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Do you understand that your attorney or the government attorney can make a specific recommendation as to what sentence to impose, and I do not have to follow that?
Yes, Your Honor.
Do you understand there's no longer any parole, and if you're sentenced to serve any time of imprisonment, that you must serve the entire time of that imprisonment?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Now, I want to be sure you understand your constitutional rights in full. Do you understand that you have the right to the assistance of a lawyer at every stage of the proceedings, including before trial, during trial, and after trial, and for any appeals to higher courts? and if you cannot afford a lawyer, the court will appoint one for you free of charge.
Yes, Your Honor.
Do you understand that you have the right that you're presumed innocent until you're proven guilty by the government beyond a reasonable doubt?
Yes, Your Honor.
Do you understand that you have the right to plead not guilty and persist in that plea and have your case tried by either a jury of 12 people or a judge sitting alone?
Yes, Your Honor.
Do you understand that you have the right to a jury of your peers drawn from the residents of the district of this court, and you would get to help select who's on the jury?
Yes, Your Honor.
Do you understand in order to find you guilty, the verdict of the jury must be unanimous? That is, all 12 jurors must agree that you were proven guilty by the government beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yes, Your Honor.
Do you understand that you could obtain a subpoena or court order to make witnesses come to court and testify during a trial on your behalf?
Yes, Your Honor.
Do you understand if you were found guilty, you could appeal such a finding of guilt to a higher court, which could set aside or modify the finding of guilt or give you a new trial?
Yes, Your Honor.
Do you understand that at a trial, you have the right to confront and cross-examine? That is, be in the courtroom and face, see, hear, and question the government's witnesses against you.
Yes, Your Honor.
Do you understand that at a trial, you do not have to testify or take the witness stand if you do not want to?
Yes, Your Honor.
Do you understand that no one can force you to do that?
Yes, Your Honor.
Do you understand that if you decide not to take the witness stand at a trial, the prosecutor cannot comment on or make reference to your failure to testify?
Yes, Your Honor.
Do you understand that by entering this guilty plea, there will be no trial, and you're giving up all of the rights I just told you about and admitting that you're guilty?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, I'm going to ask Mr. Pease to relate the elements of the crime and a brief summary of the evidence the government would have introduced if the case had gone to trial.
Yes, Your Honor. In order to obtain a conviction for tax evasion, the government would be required to prove the following essential elements beyond a reasonable doubt. First, that there was an attempt by the defendant to evade or defeat a tax or the payment of the tax. Secondly, that there was an additional tax that was due and owing. And lastly, that the defendant acted willfully. Your Honor, if this case were to go to trial, the government would prove that the defendant was guilty of the crime of tax evasion with which he is charged, in essence, through the following summary. What I'd like to do is just briefly summarize what's in my guilty plea memorandum, which the facts are more detailed, and I understand Mr. King has fully read the facts that are in the plea memo that I filed. We would prove, Your Honor, that beginning in or around 1985, Mr. Kane received, through the Senate Democratic Appropriations Committee, then Vince Fumo in charge of it, a contract to provide legislative services to the Senate of Pennsylvania. And those contracts were renewed annually through the period until 2006. This client was the most significant client for Mr. Kane, who operated a business which was called Venture Analysis Incorporated, which primarily provided services in the area of political campaign consulting and media relations. During the period that Mr. Kane worked under this contract with the Senate, he participated in working on more than 80 different campaigns from local township races through the U.S. Senate. This was his single largest source of income, but he received during the years 1997 through 2006 income from a number of other clients, including the Philadelphia Parking Authority, District Council 47, different lobbyists, and other local companies. We would, in the course of the trial, Your Honor, prove that Mr. Kane has not paid any federal income taxes or filed a tax return since 1991. The manner in which the tax evasion scheme occurred, Your Honor, was that Mr. Kane utilized his corporation, Venture Analysis Incorporated, which set up corporate bank accounts at 3 different banks, Commerce Bank, PNC Bank, and First Union National Bank. Mr. Kane directed his clients to direct his compensation for services to Venture Analysis Incorporated, where Mr. Kane would deposit the checks as income and then use the funds deposited in those accounts for a variety of personal expenditures, including everything from tuition and household expenses, credit card bills, and the like. As a result of operating the business this way, and especially the failure to file a Form 1099 or a W-2, thereby reporting his compensation to the IRS, for a number of years Mr. Kane was able to sort of stay under the radar of the IRS and by not self-reporting his income or withholding self-employment or payroll taxes, avoided the assessment and the payment of income taxes during that period of time. A search warrant was executed at Mr. Kane's home, which is also the business office of Venture Analysis, on February 13th of 2008. During the course of the search, numerous records were seized, all of which established that he received substantial amounts of income during the years 1997 through 2006. All those records would be introduced at trial to establish the sources of Mr. Kane's income as well as the expenditures in which he engaged. In addition, numerous third parties, including all of his clients who paid income to Mr. Kane and various companies and businesses and credit card companies that were the recipients of payments, Mr. Kane, which were personal in nature, all those records were obtained and they would be introduced at trial along with testimony establishing the amounts of Mr. Kane's unreported income as well as his expenditures and the purposes of those expenditures. Mr. Kane's accountant would testify at trial if we were to go to trial, and he would explain that Mr. Kane, after being contacted and receiving a grand jury subpoena in connection with the FUMO investigation, contacted him for the purpose of beginning the process of addressing his delinquent tax liability, but essentially never followed through, despite prompting from the accountant over a number of years. All of these records that have been obtained by the agents have been analyzed, and if we were to go to trial, the government would prove that for the period from 1997 through and including 2006, Mr. Kane's unreported income is approximately $1,618,000, and his unpaid loss in terms of his tax liability to the IRS is approximately $411,303. Among the additional evidence we would prove would be that Mr. Kane during the years 2002 through 2006 asked for extensions of time for the IRS to file his tax returns, but never followed through and never filed returns for any of that period of time. The records would also establish that although we have solid numbers for the years 97 through 06, in fact, Mr. Kane earned income during the years 91 through 96, but we don't have sufficient evidence to be able to establish his tax liability or unreported income for that period. And that's a summary of the facts.
Do you admit those facts, Mr. Kane?
Yes, Your Honor.
I just have one question.
Yes.
If he did file tax returns before 1991?
We can't go back before 1991, Your Honor. That's the furthest I can go back to find the last time he filed a return.
I see. Well, he
But
did
from
file in 91, or you don't know that?
No, 1991 was the last time he filed.
He did file.
Yes.
Well, if someone files and then they stop filing, you said that he got under the radar, wouldn't the fact that someone had filed in a prior year and then stopped filing, wouldn't that get the IRS's attention in some fashion?
You would think, Your Honor. I've prosecuted, I do a lot of criminal tax cases, and if this is a common tax evasion scheme that a self-employed person engages in, and by reducing IRS's knowledge or eliminating the knowledge of personal income by diverting it to a corporation, the IRS isn't getting any reporting information. It's not going to automatically trigger notices to go out to the taxpayer if the IRS has no record that income has been paid.
Even though tax returns were filed in previous years?
That's right, Your Honor. I've got another case pending with 11 defendants. It's a very similar scheme to this one.
Well,
The
it seemed to be
IRS is imperfect.
it seemed to be there ought to be some enforcement mechanism to catch that.
I agree.
Okay. Do you still wish to plead guilty, Mr. Kane?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. I'm going to find that the defendant is alert, competent, and capable of entering an informed plea, that it's a knowing and voluntary plea supported by an independent basis in fact, containing each of the essential elements of the offenses pled to. I'll therefore accept the plea and ask the defendant be arraigned on a single count of the information.
Under criminal docket number 2008, number 324, you have been charged with tax evasion under 26 U.S.C. section 7201. How do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
All right, a pre-sentence report will be prepared by the probation officer. The defendant will be required to give information to assist the officer and may have counsel present while answering any questions. Defendant and defense counsel shall sit down face-to-face and review the pre-sentence report after it is completed and notify the probation officer of any objections within the 14-day time limit set forth in Rule 32. What do you suggest in terms of the sentencing date, Mr. Pease?
Mr. Kane's going to testify in the upcoming trial of this FUMO, and we would respectfully ask the court not to schedule sentencing before February of 2009. The trial begins September 8th, and I expect it's going to last until the end of the year or into January. So we'd like to have the sentencing take place after
All right.
the follows.
Okay.
No objection to that, Your Honor.
No objection?
No objection. You can just schedule later on if you'd like.
No, I always set a date. Well, Let's pick, how about towards the end of January? What's the last Monday in January? Does anybody have a calendar?
Absolutely forgot.
January 26th.
All right, January 26th at 4 o'clock. What's the bail situation? Has Mr. Kane been arraigned before? Or is this the first appearance?
First initial appearance, Your Honor. I read the pretrial services report. I agree with the recommendation of $25,000 OR bail. There's just two issues. One, Mr. Kane has a passport which he's prepared to surrender, and we request that he do so and not apply for any new passport. Secondly, I understand Mr. Kane owns at least 2 firearms. And obviously, that's a condition of his pretrial release to surrender those firearms and not possess any firearms as well.
All right, well, I'll approve the government's request. Do you have any objection to that, Mr. Scuderi?
No, Your Honor.
All right, we'll have $25,000 OR bail. Where is your passport?
With him.
Here, Your Honor.
All right, you'll turn it over to the pretrial officer right now, please. All right. Okay. Where are the firearms? All right, what arrangements do you want to make for those?
We will need to surrender by selling them or transferring them through a licensed firearms dealer within 72 hours.
Within 72 hours? All right. Mr. Scuderi, will you make sure that happens?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, you understand that, Mr. Kane?
Yes.
Do you have a plan to sell them or
That plan to transfer them, yes, Your Honor.
transfer them
Yes, Your Honor.
to a firearms dealer?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, well, make sure you do it according to law.
Yes, Your
Okay? All right. All right, anything further?
No,
All right, thank you. Court's in recess. Oh, one other thing. This district is participating in a digital audio program where certain proceedings can be uploaded on through our ECF system and be accessed through Pacer. Do you have any? This has been a public proceeding. There's no impoundment here, and there's also been a fair amount of publicity about this matter. Do either counsel have any objection to this hearing being uploaded?
No objection.
No, Your Honor.
All right. So we'll upload this on the digital Pacer system. Okay. Thank you very much. Court's in recess.
Thank you, Your Honor.